My name is Bob Feasel. I was born in 1921, and I don't remember the event. I was too long. Anyway, we were living on a lake out at Lake Winnemucet outside of DeLand, and my grandmother had a house out there, and there was a rumor at one time that the house caught fire, and I was in the house, and she saved my life. But that turned out not to be true, because I found a journal of my mother's that said that she was in another house at the time the house burnt, so I wasn't there, which was good because I didn't like that first story. So, being on the lake out there, of course, when I started growing up, my brother and I had a lot of fun swimming, building boats. We had kayaks and sailboats. And we stayed in the water just about all day long. And
so you'd say you're a
it was fun.
You're an ocean man, but you're also a mountain man too.
Yeah. I always liked the mountains, but we spent a lot of time on the water too. So, and then as we kept growing up, I started taking trumpet lessons. I had the first lesson from my dad, and I was about 6 years old, I think, in grade school. And I was very interested in it, and I stuck with it for a long time. And I studied with a very famous trumpet teacher in Orlando, and my mother would take me down there every Saturday for my lesson. And it was sort of interesting because this trumpet player was a student of Herbert Clark, who was the first trumpet player with the Sousa Band in that way back then. And he was very talented. He liked to play. And he finally got me going, so he thought I had a pretty good possibility of getting to being a good trumpet player. So he and I would play all kinds of stuff after my 30-minute lesson, which would go on for about 2 hours. And my mother was sitting out in the car waiting on me all this time. But he really enjoyed that, and so did I. But it did develop into a very traumatic experience. He decided that my lip position on my mouthpiece was not right, because when he played, he had it way down on his lower lip. And he thought if I could do that, I could play like he did. So he decided to try it. So we did. We moved it down there, and I practiced for a week or so. And it didn't do any good. I couldn't play that way. And then I went back to him, and he said, well, let's try the old way again. And I couldn't play that way either. So after about 2 years of practice, I finally got it back again. But it was quite a traumatic experience because I really worked at it, and I didn't know what was going to happen.
How'd you get it back?
How did I get it back? Just practicing. Just using the natural plays on my lip and practicing. And then I went to school in New York for a year with another famous trumpet teacher, Ernest Williams. And right after that year, I got into the Army. And I was interested in trying to find some position in the Army where I could continue my music. And we found one. There was a captain that was given the job of organizing the band for the Air Force. And he traveled all over the country getting top musicians who were about to be drafted and put them in this band. So we had, that was Boca Raton, Florida, 3rd Army Air Force Band. And we called him, and he told us, he said, well, if he studied with Ernest Williams, I'll take him. So I got in there, and I went to the reception center in Camp Blanding, and he told us how to take some shortcuts to get my serial number and all that so that I could get assigned to his outfit. And that worked. And we went down to Miami to take basic training. When we got there, they said, "You're exempt from basic training." So I never had basic training. We went on up to Boca Raton, and we went up there, and the barracks were not even completed. They just built the base. So we stayed in that luxurious but Boca Raton club for about 6 weeks, I guess. And of course, there wasn't any luxuries then. The Army had leased it, and there was nothing but bare beds in there. But anyway, the base was finally completed, and we went back over there. And one of the greatest experiences in my life, I think, was being in that band and playing dance. We played dance jobs every Saturday night on the base. And we had a perfect dance band. We had 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, 5 saxes, and piano and drums and bass. And it was really a pleasure to do that. So I stayed there for 2.5 years. And then they had the Battle of the Bulge in Germany. And they decided they needed some replacements over there. So they took us out of the band. They took 2 segments out of the band, and I was in the second one. And we went to Fort Maxey, Texas, to take infantry training. And that lasted 6 weeks. And then we got on a boat and went to Germany and got off there. And I was very fortunate because the war in Germany ended about 2 weeks after I got there. So I never had any action in there. But my classification was changed from a trumpet player to a rifleman replacement, which is not too pleasant. And so that lasted. We were in the Army of Occupation for 1 year after the war ended over there. And they also prepared us to go to Japan, which we never did because Truman was my friend and dropped the bomb. So we stayed there a year after that. Then I came home and went to Stetson on the GI Bill of Rights. And that's where I met Millie. And that was the biggest adventure in my life. We had some experiences growing up with my brother. One was we used to go out in the woods and build all kinds of things, bridges and lean-tos and stuff out of the natural surroundings. And one day we were riding our bicycles back there to do some work, and my brother had a saw hanging down on his handlebars, and the thing caught in his front wheel, and he went over and landed on the cement, on his face, I think. He was really scarred up, and his main reaction was, he said, I'm going to die. But he didn't die. We just went home and found Mother, and he took care of him. And then there was another experience. We took 2 friends of ours from the band, and my parents had a little pop-up camper. We went out on the St. Johns River, put up camp. This was during the Christmas holidays, I think. And we were going to go duck hunting. So we got in this boat and went down the St. Johns River to duck hunt. And we didn't have any luck. So they decided, well, we'll take 2 of you guys and put you on this island. And then we'll run around and try to get the ducks to come by you and you shoot. So they did that, and I was one guy, and there was another guy with me. And we were on this island, and we heard a gunshot. We thought maybe they were shooting the ducks. But my brother was standing in the boat, unloading his 12-gauge shotgun, and it went off, and he put a hole in the bottom of the boat. And you know, when you put a hole in the bottom of a boat, it sinks. So they finally got the boat close to shore where it was sort of shallow. And another boat came by and took them back because this one fella had some bird shot in his leg. It just glanced off the wood. It wasn't serious, but anyway, they wanted to take him to the doctor, so they ignored us. They just went on back to camp, and we had to stay there on that island. They said, we'll send a boat back for you. And they never did. And it was getting dark. We didn't want to spend the night on that island. So the boat came by, and we flagged them down. I think it was the last boat that was out there, probably. And they stopped and took us back. So that was a pretty good experience. And let's see what else I got here.
Where did you meet Mama?
Where did I meet Nana? Millie. We were with Stetson. Millie graduated from high school in DeLand in 1947. And she was at Stetson too, and I didn't meet her until the last quarter when I was about to graduate.
You almost missed her.
And we were in a sociology class, and she walked in that day. In fact, I saw her walking down the sidewalk, and I followed her. And we went in, I asked her where she was going. She said, I'm going to sociology class. And I said, so am I. So we went together, and I made a point of sitting right behind her because I didn't even know her name. And
you found out.
The professor passed around a sheet of paper for everybody to sign. So that's how I found out her name was Mildred. And I called her Mildred after we got through. She corrected me. And it's not Mildred, it's Millie. So after that, we had a whole year. I had graduated in December, and I went to work at the store, Feasel Pane Glass, for about a year. And Millie kept on to school. And we were going to wait till Millie graduated in 1950 to get married. But we finally decided, why wait? So we got married in September. And Millie graduated in 50. And at that time, she was pregnant with Linda. So that got us an early start on our children.
Yeah. What was it? Linda came out and then Connie came screaming.
So after that, 3 years apart, we had Connie and Judy. And of course, Judy's sister always said that she was adopted.
Mean.
But she didn't believe that. And she wasn't.
She's the only one without red hair.
That's right. That's right.
How long did you live in the house in DeLand?
We lived in that house in DeLand about 26 years. And I was in the business of Feasel Pane Glass after my father retired. So
he started that business?
He started that business in 1921, the year I was born. And he had a partner. There were two of them. They were in the contracting business. And they had quite a reputation. This partner he had was an artist, and he'd decorate these buildings with all kinds of fancy things. And they even had a reputation of decorating theaters in the South. They did some in South Carolina. And that's the way it got started. But later on, my dad wanted to go into selling paint in a store, and they discussed it. And Mr. Horning, who was his partner, decided he didn't want to do that. So they split up, and Horning went into the contracting business, stayed in that. My dad had the store, put in paint, and then later on he put in glass. And when I started working there, the newest department was the picture framing. And I went to Atlanta and took some tips from a salesman up there that showed me how to cut mats and cut frames and all this, enjoying them. And of course, that's all out of date today because they've got better ways of doing it. And mounting pictures was always a problem with ours. I had one experience with a customer of mine when we first got started. She brought in a diploma of her husband, who had died several years ago, and it was all wrinkled. It was on sheepskin. And I had learned in Atlanta that you use a special paste on it, because we always use paste to mount pictures. So excuse me. So I put a lot of this paste on there, mounted this picture, took all of the wrinkles out of it, and she didn't like that. She was really fussing when she picked it up. So I knew I did it right. I couldn't do anything else. So I wrote her a letter and told her what I'd done to find out how to do it. And we had done it that way. And she finally became a good friend and a customer of mine. So that letter must have been convincing.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to do right by
Okay.
people, because then you keep them around, right? You
It's
keep
like,
them,
yeah,
keep them happy, and then
right.
that's. I mean, that if especially when it's in your business.
But mounting was a real problem because a lot of things I mounted would develop wrinkles or bubbles or something under them. And the only way to correct it was to just take it and peel all that stuff off and do it again. So I've spent hours on some of them doing that.
How long did you run Feasel Paint and Glass?
I was there for about 26 and a half years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that retirement party.
Yeah, your retirement party was great.
Yeah, it really worked out well because the man I sold it to worked for me right out of high school, and he worked all the time with us. And he was a good country boy who was honest and trustworthy, and he learned the business very well. And he came to me one day and he said, I'd like to know what my future is going to be if I stay here. He had an offer from another place in New Smyrna Beach. And at that time, I didn't want to lose him, so I told him we'd work out some kind of plan where he could buy it. So I was paying him a bonus every year. I think it was $500. And I told him I'd give him a bonus based on the profits. And he could take that extra money and buy stock in the business while he was still working with me, so that he was starting to purchase it right then. And then we set a date. I was going to retire in December of 1975. And that was about 2 years away. So I told him I was going to take 1 year away, pretty much, and let him operate it by himself, which he did. And they had an agreement to pay for it over 20 years, I think it was. And he never missed a payment. So that's one reason we could retire early.
Yeah, nice.
And we retired in 1975.
And you were how old?
I was 54.
Oh,
Millie was 46, I guess.
amazing. Retired at 46.
And we had decided some time ago that we wanted to move to North Carolina when we retired and build a house up there in the mountains. So that's what we did. We hired a contractor to put up the shell, and he put up the main part of the house and the roof and so forth. And we took over and finished the inside ourselves. Took about 2 years to do that, but it was fun.
Beautiful house.
Tell about the wood stove that you used for heating the house.
Yeah, of course, we were living there 12 months out of the year, summer and winter. And the elevation of the house was 4,900 feet. And we had a lot of snow and a lot of cold weather. But being flatlanders, it was new to us, and we enjoyed it. And we decided to heat our house with wood. So we bought a wood stove and put it in the basement. And then we had to get the wood. So Millie and I cut that wood for 18 years and loaded it in a trailer, hauled it to the house, and unloaded it. And
Wouldn't you just kind of scour the mountains for fallen
well, we
trees?
didn't have any trouble getting wood. I didn't cut any live trees. We had a lot of dead trees on our property, and I cut those. And then the power line would come through every now and then and clear the road, and they'd leave that wood there. So we'd go get that. So we never had any trouble getting wood. And it took about 5 or 6 cords a year to heat the house. And I had it piped through the water heater too. So we had plenty of water. And that worked real well. And then after those 18 years, we decided, well, we better quit this. So we got gas and used gas for 10 years.
Propane.
Propane. So we used those 2 systems for 28 years up there.
Oh my gosh.
And I know at one time I measured the snow. We had 13 feet of snow one winter. And we got to 30 below zero one time.
Not wind chill, but temperature.
Yeah, temperature.
That's
Were you chopping wood when did that happen?
No, I did that on my table saw.
Table saw.
Oh, yeah. Tell us
Yeah,
about
and
that.
it was sort of dumb too, but it always is when you do something like that. I was building a tool shed and a playhouse above. It was 2 stories tool shed. And I was making the windows for it. And I had to cut a bunch of 2x4s to make frames for the windows, just small. So I was ripping 2x4s. And I was throwing the piece down on the right side of the saw. I should have thrown it down on the left side of the saw because I'd throw it down over there and I'd drag my hand back over the saw. And that's when I hit the blade. So it was funny. Millie was up in the kitchen making pickles or something.
Making a pickle. She was-
I went up and told her I cut my finger. She said, "Did you cut it off?" I said, "Yes, I did." So we got in the car and went to the emergency room. And then when we got there, the doctor said, "Did you bring the end of your finger?" We said, "No." He said, "You better go back and get it." So he sent Millie back home. And she was down on her hands and knees looking through that sawdust for that finger. And she finally found it. And she put it in a cloth and put it ice around it or something. And headed back to this emergency room. And the guard at the gate down there said, "I've never seen Millie drive through that fast before." That was funny. But then when we got to the hospital, the doctor said, "No, I can't use it, it's too mutilated." So I'm glad they didn't, because if they had used it, I'd had to stay in the hospital for a couple of weeks, probably.
Better off.
And I didn't have to, I just went home.
Tell the
We're
story
gonna switch
about
up memory cards real quick.
Julico and good fortune.
Oh, yeah.
Your boating days.
Oh, well, this can go on forever.
93 years is a long time, isn't it?
Well, let's see, we'll talk about Alaska. Between building the house, we took a little break every now and then and decided to take a trip. So we took 3 trips to Alaska and drove all the way.
Oh, you're good. Keep going.
You all right?
Just plugging in the battery. Okay. Okay, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those 3, we took the first trip with a tent and a Volkswagen diesel Rabbit and a little backpacking stove was all we had. So we cooked on an open fire most of the time. We were gone over 2 months. And we drove, I think, about 13,000 miles. I've got that all written down. But, and then the second trip we took to Alaska was 3 years, this was in 1980, the first one. The next one was 1987. and the third one was in 1993. And the second trip we had a pop-up camper, and the third trip we had a travel trailer, which I pulled with a Jeep Cherokee. And of those 3 trips together, of course, we covered not just going to Alaska, we covered a lot of Canada and also the northern United States. So we drove on those 3 trips, we drove a total of 40,000 miles. And it's hard to believe, but it was a great experience. Of course, that first trip on the 10 was the most adventurous. We went to see my nephew Craig in North Dakota. He was in the Air Force up there. And we left there and drove into Canada. And the first night we camped in Canada, we had a tremendous storm, downpour, rain, and lightning. So we got the tent up and crawled in there and tried to cook a hot dog on that little stove I guess we had. And then we finally went to bed. And in the middle of the night, we were floating in a lake of water. Our bags were wet, and our clothes were wet. Everything was wet. I think we had our tent set up in a hole somewhere. Anyway, the campground had a dryer, so we got straightened out the next morning. And it wasn't cold, so it was all right. But those are some of the adventures we had with the tent. And when we went with the pop-up camper, it wasn't too bad. But our most pleasant trip was the last one with that travel trailer. Because we had all our facilities there. We had shower and toilet and place to eat and cook with an oven and all that. So we had a lot of fun with that. But
what about your boats?
That trip lasted 14,000 miles.
Wow.
And it was over 8 weeks, I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell about the camping trip where the skunk came.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was another trip we took to New England one time. Not too long after our first Alaska trip. And we were still in the tent. And we went to Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and all that up there. And then coming back, we stopped in the Adirondacks in New York and camped. And one night when we were in our tent, there was a lot of coons outside circling the tent. And I was afraid they might claw through the tent, you know. And the next night, we went to another campsite, still in New York, and the same thing happened. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, something right near my head was pressing on the tent. And I thought maybe it was a coon trying to get in. So I took my fist and I hit it real hard like that. And it turned out to be a skunk. And you know what skunks do when they're unhappy? He did it. So we had to go home with the tent tied on top of the car and stay in motels the rest of the way. But that was a good experience.
That's great. You punched a skunk.
The only other really disappointment was we went to Denali, and we were hoping to see the mountain. They've got a bus ride that you can take. It takes all day. It's an 85-mile trip to where Denali is. But Denali is hardly ever clear. It's covered with clouds most of the time. And it was that time. And we went out there. Well, we took that bus trip one time, and then we found a place on the highway to stop and watch and see if the clouds would clear up. And we stayed there for a couple hours waiting on it. And it finally cleared up a little bit, and I got a picture, but it wasn't real good. But anyway, we didn't really see Denali like we'd like to. But Millie had some experiences in that log she wrote. She was in a laundromat one day, and she struck up a conversation with some lady in there. And the lady said, "You know, I never thought I'd go to the laundromat just to get away from my husband." And then another experience we had, we went up to a little restaurant one time along the highway. We were going to get lunch, and we were thinking about a sandwich. So we asked the waitress if we could have a ham sandwich. And she went back to the kitchen and came back and said, no, we don't have any ham. So we said, well, how about roast beef? So she went back and checked on that. She said, no, we don't have that. And at about 3 seconds on, we started out asking her for water. She said, we don't have any water because the generator doesn't work. And then there was one other thing. We asked her for turkey sandwich or something like that, and she didn't have that. So a little later, she said, this is getting very embarrassing. She sat down with us, and we talked a while. And finally, the cook came out and said, I found the ham. So we had a ham sandwich.
I never heard that story before.
It's in the book, I think.
That's funny.
Talk about Julico and Good Fortune.
Okay.
Did you build those boats?
Huh?
Did you build those boats?
No.
Okay.
No, they were used boats.
Okay.
I mean, I practically built them. But I guess that was a fetish of mine. I wanted to have a boat. And Millie went along with it very well. And the kids did too. So we got this little 26-foot cabin cruiser in Daytona. And it served its purpose for a while, but it was getting sort of crowded. So we used that for several years, going up to Silver Glen Springs, and had a lot of fun with that. That was a good place to swim. Judy learned to swim there, didn't you?
I learned to swim on Jekyll Island
Oh,
in that pool.
Yeah, we went to Jekyll Island about twice, I think, with that boat.
Was that the Good Fortune?
No, that was the Julico. That was that 26-foot boat. So then we finally traded that and got a 40-foot twin-engine caval cruiser that fit 26-foot and just had one engine. So it's a lot safer to have two engines.
How did you come up with the name Julico?
Mother did that. Yeah, she thought of that. It was Julico, Judy, Lana, and Kenny. Judy, Linda, and Connie. Uh-huh.
Oh,
That's clever.
And then the big boat we bought was the Good Fortune, and we didn't change the name. We kept that name. They say it's bad luck to change the name on a boat. So we had a lot of fun with that one. We went to Jekyll Island and Silver Glen Springs a lot. And we finally went to the Bahamas. We made 2 trips, or I did, with the big boat to the Bahamas. And we went first with the family, all 3 of us, and stayed in Freeport and cruised around the Bahamas a while. And then the second trip, we were friends with Bill Sherman. He's a lawyer in DeLand, and he had a boat. So he decided he'd like to go over during the Christmas season where the fishing is supposed to be real good in that time of year. So we went to Bimini, and he was going to take his boat and then my boat. We'd go together. But when we got to West Palm Beach to get the boats ready, he looked in his bilge, and he had a bilge full of gasoline. His tank had sprung a leak, apparently. So, you can't use an electric pump to get gasoline out. So we just left the boat there and took my boat. We went by ourselves. And we put on an extra life raft in case we needed it. And we called on the radio to report that we were taking off so somebody around would know it. And we went over and didn't have any trouble going over. But when we started to come back, it was so rough, we decided not to do it. And we took I think we took that Shawks airline back to West Palm Beach. And that airline has a history too. It was an amphibian plane that was a World War II plane, I'm sure. And several years later, that plane was taken off in Miami and one of the wings came off. And it crashed. And but we couldn't get back. We had to go back. Let's see, you, Judy, and Connie went on that trip. We went back to get the boat, and we took off from Bimini at night and went through the Bermuda Triangle. We got back to West Palm, and and then the next day they had a terrific storm. Rain and high winds and rough seas. But we were on the intercoastal waterway, so we were all right. Yeah.
That was fun.
Well, what else you want to know?
I've had so many adventures, Boppa.
Adventures?
He's had so many.
Talk about your trips to Switzerland and all over Europe.
Yeah, we went to Switzerland, actually. We went 2 times on a tour, and we went 3 times with some friends that live in Hendersonville. Just was a hiking trip, mainly. And we hiked all those mountains over there in that one section. One time we were going for a month, and most of the time it was just 2 weeks. But we had flown across the Atlantic, I think, 5 times. And Millie really enjoyed it all. And she was a good hiker. Yeah, she did a lot of hiking. We took a lot of trips around this country. We went to Texas to see the spring beauties and the, whatever they call them.
The bluebells?
Yeah, all those flowers. And then we went to Big Bend Park down there on the Mexican border. And we hiked all over that place. It's all desert and rocks. But it was interesting. And of course, the Appalachian Trail was right behind our house in North Carolina.
Appalachian Trail was all around the house.
We hiked that a lot. We didn't spend any nights out there, just day hikes. But we covered a lot of that trail.
Did you have do you have favorite things that you love to eat or read or watch or listen to?
Millie was a good cook. She cooked a lot of good stuff. And Judy knows more about it than I do, probably.
He loves to listen to classical music. Tell him about how you and Mother used to listen every day to classical music.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I've played every one of those CDs up there at least twice, and those on the bottom. We just start at the end and go all the way down. We play one at breakfast every day. Another thing we did in North Carolina was pick a lot of natural produce, like strawberries and peaches and blueberries. And I remember, of course, Millie had to work real hard with that because she had to freeze all that stuff. And one day we picked 28 gallons of strawberries. And then you had to take them home and get them ready for freezing. And we had peaches and blueberries and blackberries and apples and oranges and tomatoes and grapefruit. And we had a garden, but it didn't produce anything.
Tell about how your friend at church brought you those little baby food jars.
Yeah, we had a neighbor, a native gal, a little mountain gal, and she brought us a whole bunch of these baby food jars. She said, "This is for your canning season."
Because the elevation was.
Oh yeah, we tried all kinds of things with that garden. We were going to make it organic, and we bought green sand and all kinds of stuff. And some of the people gave us. I would take the trailer down and empty out the stalls of their horses, and get all kinds of manure. And one time I went to Mars Hill and bought 500 earthworms. And we did everything right. But it's just, we couldn't plant anything until June, and if you didn't pick it until September, 1st of September, you couldn't do anything. Tomatoes would freeze, and
You'd
So
shoot
the garden-
possums. You used to shoot possums.
what's that?
You would no groundhogs. Groundhogs.
Oh, that was one thing. We the garden was still growing, we had trouble with groundhogs, and they'd get in there and eat the lettuce and all that stuff. And I had a neighbor friend who was a good mountain man too, and he said the only thing you can do is shoot those groundhogs. So I went to Kmart and bought a .22 rifle, and I started shooting them. I shot about 7 or 8 of them, I think, and but that didn't help. So I had to figure out something else. So we put a fence around the garden, and I put an electric thing on the top of it. And that worked for a while, and then the groundhogs found out they could crawl up the post and get over. And the electric fence killed a lot of birds. So we finally gave up on that and gave up on the garden.
You had mice too.
But,
You had mice at the.
Rat traps, didn't you?
oh yeah, mice are very common. Everybody has them up there. And I went around that house several times trying to plug up every hole I could find. And we still had them. They
You would
get it.
catch them live, wouldn't you? You had live mouse traps.
Oh yeah, we did. There was a little trap at an angle, and they'd crawl in there and run back in here, and it would go up and shut the door. And I caught a lot of them. I had traps all over the house.
I remember that.
So you built a side house too for the kids to play in.
Playhouse.
Yeah, I had a playhouse.
Loved that playhouse.
Yeah, and Melissa and was it you?
Spent the night out there.
Yeah, started to spend the night.
She sleptwalked.
Huh?
She sleptwalked.
She was a sleepwalker.
She left me.
I know she went up to the house and it was snowing.
Yeah.
It didn't last very long.
Connie said, Marion, you make sure you don't leave Melissa. And I said, okay. And so I woke up one night and then there goes Melissa out the door. Out to the house, sleepwalking. So I chased her back up. It didn't last long.
Another story about groundhogs is that when they got fed up with the garden, they started eating my car. They got in the engine compartment and they'd eat electrical wires, and they defected the air conditioning in our Volkswagen, I remember, and we were taking a trip to Florida too, so we didn't have any air conditioning. And then one time they got in there and they clawed through the radiator to get the antifreeze, and of course that'll kill them if they drink it. But I had to get a new radiator.
Tell about some of your experiences tobogganing in the mountains.
Well, Millie had the greatest experience. She broke her ankle. We were flying down this hill on the golf course, and I knew we were going to turn over, but I figured, I've turned over a lot of times. I just get up and go on. Millie was behind me, and she turned over and flew off of that thing and landed on her ankle and broke it. And I had to get the truck, the SUV, and drive down and get her and pick her up and put her in the car. And we went home, and she just decided it was sprained, so we didn't go to the doctor. But the next day it got pretty bad, so we finally went. And he couldn't operate on it. He said it was too swollen. But it was it really hurt her. Driving into Asheville, if you'd go over a little bump, it would really hurt. And she was lying there on the table in that doctor's office, and all of a sudden he grabbed that ankle and twisted it and just set it.
Oh.
But it really hurt her. But anyway, it was good. It fixed it.
She didn't have surgery?
No. And he looked at it later on, took x-rays, he said it's perfect. So it never bothered her. But that's the main experience, tobogganing. Then we didn't toboggle anymore. You kids do, I guess.
Yeah,
Judy did.
Yeah, that was fun.
Judy tried to go under a car one time.
Yeah. Went under a
What
car.
about your photography? Didn't you have your own dark room for a while?
I had a dark room in Germany. We one place we were staying, they had a dark room. Whoever would live there, and they had some paper and stuff like that and chemicals. So I've got some of the pictures, but they're not too good. That paper was real old, I guess. But yeah, we stayed in one nice house there in somewhere in Germany, and the owners had been gone for some time. And I went up and was scrounged around the attic and things. And I got that music for you. I sent you some music. And I got a clock, and I sent that to Mother. And I got a typewriter one time, so I typed all my letters. But the German typewriter is different. The F and the J are backwards.
Oh.
And that was the only thing.
You used to love taking pictures, didn't you? And framing them.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful pictures.
Yeah, I did that here for quite a while.
With a film camera?
Hmm?
Film camera?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to photograph? Just documenting where you lived and the adventures you went on?
Where I lived?
What was your favorite thing to take pictures of?
Oh, mainly on our trips, I guess, out west, and I've got a bunch of stuff that's probably no good now for anything, but then let's see, 2005, we gave up in Wolf Laurel and came here, and Millie never did really accept this. She would. She said this is a great place. She likes it after you explain it to her and all. But she never thought it was home. She kept saying, I want to go home. So.
Wolf Laurel was your home for the longest time, wasn't it? You lived in Wolf Laurel the longest?
Yeah, 28 years. That was more than Florida.
So you worked for 24 years?
26 and a half.
26, and you've been retired for how many years?
Oh gosh, it's been, 35 years now?
Amazing.
A lot longer than you worked.
I know, yes.
Such a good life. Such a good life.
Yeah, well, I was able to do it because of some of the arrangements we made. If I be the first to die, let grief not blacken your sky. Be bold yet modest in your grieving. There is a change, but not a leaving. For just as death is part of life, the dead live on forever in the living. And all the gathered richness of our journey, the moments ahead are shared, and mysteries explored, the steady layering of intimacy stored, the thing that made us laugh or weep or sing, the joy or sunlight, snow, and first unfurled of the spring, the wordless language of look and touch, and knowing each giving and each taking. These are not flowers that fade, nor trees that fall and crumble, nor are they stone. For even stone cannot the wind and rain withstand, and mighty mountains, peaks in time reduced to sand. What we were, we are. What we are, we have. A co-joined past, imperishably pleasant. So when you walk in the woods where once we walked together, and scan in vain the dappled bank beside you for my shadow, or pause where we always did before, the hill to gaze across the land, and spotting something reach for my hand, and finding none, feel sorrow start to steal upon you. Be still, close your eyes, breathe, listen for my footfall in your heart. I am not gone, but merely walk within you.
Great.
That was very appropriate because we used to do a lot of hiking up here.